My name is Sigrid. I'm Senior Director of D&I at Delivery Hero. And in this very edition of HeroTalks, we will be speaking with Niklas Östberg, who's our CEO and co-founder at Delivery Hero, Kane Kennelly, our Senior Specialist for Governance, Risk and Compliance, and as I mentioned, two of our newly appointed, very welcome, members of the Delivery Hero Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Board, Diana S. Navas-Rosette and Melissa Thomas-Hunt. Diana is the Director of Global Diversity and Inclusion Strategy and Innovation at Microsoft, and we are thrilled that she could join us today. Melissa has an equally impressive experience and is today a John Forbes Distinguished Professor of Business Administration and a Professor of Public Policy at the University of Virginia, as well as the former Global Head of Diversity and Belonging and current D&I Advisor at Airbnb. Welcome, everyone. All right, we will shortly be discussing the importance of prioritizing D&I for all digital companies, including Microsoft, Airbnb, and Delivery Hero, but also how leaders and allies can really leverage the positions of privilege for positive change. We would love for you to submit your Q&As in the Q&A section, your questions in the Q&A section, so that we can answer them either live as part of our discussion or at the end of the panel. Now, my introduction to our panelists was mainly focusing on their titles and not on what they actually do or who they are. So I would like to give them a chance to present themselves. And I think we can start with you, Kane. Who are you? What's your background? And what about D&I makes you excited?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sigrid. So I'm Kane. As Sigrid mentioned, I'm part of the governance, risk, and compliance team. I've been with Delivery Hero now for almost a year. And prior to joining Delivery Hero, I held various roles as an external auditor, a consultant, and also an in-house risk manager. And then at Delivery Hero, in terms of D&I, as also kind of mentioned, I'm the co-chair of a work stream focused on male allyship. And in my home country, I belong to an underrepresented minority. And kind of through this experience, diversity and inclusion has always been something that's been around in my life and that I've been engaged with. And I think when it boils down to it, it's like not everyone in the world has a seat at the table right now, and this has ultimately kind of a negative impact on the human psyche as a whole. And so I think D&I initiatives can and should ultimately lead to kind of a collective human experience, one of equity, one of where people have a sense of belonging, and where we're able to benefit from the perspectives of everyone. And so I find this very inspiring and motivating, which is why I continue to prioritize D&I.
Thanks, Kane, and welcome to the panel. Maybe we continue with you, Melissa?
Absolutely. Let me begin by saying that I'm a lifelong academic, multiple decades in the making, specifically a business school professor. I've been focused on unleashing the potential of people in organizations for their own career trajectories, but also for the benefit of organizations. And I was honored to serve as the former global head of diversity and belonging for Airbnb. And I currently serve as a senior advisor on a research initiative on connection and belonging. Why am I passionate about diversity and inclusion? Start by thinking about why would any business choose not to have the very best talent at its disposal? Without a diversity and inclusion lens, that's actually what we do. A focus on diversity opens the aperture to get the broadest and best array of talent. And having that diverse array of lived experiences, perspectives, insights is good for getting new customers and meeting their needs, growing a business, and improving society. So those are some of the reasons I'm passionate about it.
Thanks, Melissa. Those sounds like good enough reasons for anyone to get interested in D&I would say. Diana, what about you?
Well, hello, everyone. Such a delight to be able to join you this wonderful Friday. So I am a professional in the field of diversity, equity, and inclusion with over 16 years of experience leading change and linking human capital to strategic business results. I'm passionate about creating sustainable and equitable workplaces. And currently, I drive key elements of the global diversity and inclusion strategy for Microsoft. When I think about this work of justice, equity, and inclusion, they've been personal pursuits long before they were professional ones. As someone who identifies as an immigrant, as someone who identifies as an underrepresented minority in the current country I live, I realized early on in life that I had a responsibility, that I had a role to play to create a more just and inclusive world. And that only intensified when I entered what I consider to be one of the most important roles in my life. And it's to be the mother of a 4-year-old boy who constantly reminds me that there's still much more that we need to do to create equitable spaces, communities, and societies.
Thanks, Diana. Those were quite impressive and also inspirational words. Niklas, let's round off this line of presentations with you.
Sure. So, Niklas, CEO, founder of or co-founder of Delivery Hero. Been always interested in entrepreneurship and so on, and then ended up starting this fantastic company. The reason for the interest in this space is, of course, I want to build the best product and the best company on the earth, and there is no way that we can build that company without building a diverse and inclusive space where people can be themselves at their best self, and therefore we have a lot of work to making sure that we get there, making sure we get all mindsets, all opinions. So I think it goes without saying that I'm super excited about this space. We want to be the world champions here as well.
World champion for diversity and inclusion. I'm going to put that on my strategy for 2022, Niklas. So thank you for giving me that headline. I would actually like to continue taking the baton there and get straight into it, because Niklas, you already mentioned D&I in connection to business. And there is currently debate going on around what D&I means for the modern workspace and how we can actually incorporate it into the most relevant parts of the business, if not to say all. Diana, I would like to hear your opinion first and then invite everyone else to the conversation. So let's start with maybe setting the foundation. What does D&I mean in our current workplace, and what doesn't it? Is there any limitation to what D&I can affect, influence, or accomplish?
Yeah, so I love that piece of creating that foundation of common language. And so when we think about diversity and inclusion, a lot of times we think about separate concepts, and the reality is that they're interconnected. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, they're all come together. Diversity is about the differences, the variations in a group, and those can encompass social identities like gender identity, race, ethnicity, age, sexual orientation, disability, class, caste. And there are others that are more personal attributes like our expertise, our values, our worldviews, some mindsets or ethics or our experiences. When we think about inclusion, it's about how well the contributions, the presence, and the perspectives of different groups of people are valued and integrated into the environment. So inclusion happens when we value the perspectives and contributions of all people, and we intentionally incorporate their diverse needs and viewpoints. And so when we think about that diverse and inclusive modern workplace, we are looking at a workplace that makes everyone, regardless of who they are or what they do for the organization, feel equally involved, supported, empowered, and trusted.
Thank you, Diana. Maybe following up with you, Melissa, are we there yet? What is the current status of companies? I mean, just not to draw everyone under the same type of brush here, but what Diana just described is not something that happens overnight. How do you think companies in general that you have your eyes on in your network are doing currently?
So we're on a journey. The reality is that there's so much more work to be done. I think in the aftermath of the last 20 months, there are many companies who've taken up this mantle because they think it was the right thing to do from a PR perspective. And now we're actually seeing which are going to be the companies that stay the course, that are truly committed, that recognize that it's not only something that is good for business, which it absolutely is, but that it's also important for our society to create wealth and opportunity for a broader array of individuals. And so, we are on a journey. There's a lot more that we have to do, but part of the recognition is that it can't be a sideshow. It has to be integral and embedded in the work. And that means it's hard. It takes persistence. It takes deliberate effort. It takes CEOs and executives who are deeply committed and model those behaviors.
Completely agree, 100%. And Niklas, when we talk about D&I not being a sideshow, how do you think Delivery Hero is doing there? And I'm not speaking as a communications person now, but as your supporter for D&I in general, how do we make sure that it's not just a sideshow?
That we make tangible actions that actually makes an impact, making sure that we truly treat our employees equitable, and that we making sure that we're making changes in our processes, recruiting processes, making sure that our succession planning actually has a diverse group of people, making sure that we take unbiased training, making sure that workplace is actually accessible, setting up a tech academy is something we have done to making sure that we start getting more female leaders in the tech space, because there are still too few of them. I hope that it will change and that we can be part of driving that change. So I think there's a long way to go. I think we've proven that at least we are very serious about it. We are taking a lot of steps in that path. It will not happen from today to tomorrow. I wish it would, but it just doesn't. But I think it's very clear that we are making very big efforts of making a change, and I think I'm very committed to it. I know it's gonna make a difference if we have a diverse and inclusive workplace. It matters a lot, and of course, in my role, I have influence, and I'll have to making sure that I'll do whatever I can, and hopefully that filters through the organization as well. That the awareness and the actions that we take. So I absolutely don't think that. I don't know, for us it's way more of actually making sure that we actually change something, because otherwise I'm very, very sure that eventually people will call it out. That is empty talk, and I think that's the worst. So we definitely take action, but it's a long way. So I'm also a little bit impatient, but step by step.
Sigrid, if I may, there's 2 points that I want to highlight. One that Melissa raised and one from Niklas. Definitely in the past couple of months, and I say couple, but it's been more like 20. There is a desire from employees. There's a desire from people in general who are interested in companies to get transparency from corporations and to demand action in social issues. And so that has raised the stakes, right? And as Melissa pointed, this is more than just the words that we're saying or the statements and the little set of slogans that have been put out there by some corporations. People really want to see the action. And then to Nicholas' point is that understanding that this is going to be a journey, that some companies have been doing this work for a long time and others are just starting. And that there is no right or wrong answer, because what may work for one company is not going to work for another, but that there is an opportunity for collaboration across industry and within industries to accelerate the speed of change.
100% agree, Diana, and you raised such a good question in terms of transparency. Yes, employees are becoming more eager to understand what their corporations are actually doing, what their companies are actioning, so not just talking about in terms of the buzzwords and the headlines. So a question actually to the entire panel group, and maybe we'll start with you and continue with Ken and continue with Niklas to represent the DH view before we move on to Diana and Melissa. What type of transparency are actually employees looking for? I mean, it's not just about presenting perhaps the data and the actions, but in terms of understanding the D&I work, in terms of seeing the change that's being made, the obstacles or the opportunities ahead, what level of accountability and transparency are people expecting? Kane, what do you think?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I guess this is something that we'll kind of find out along this journey as well, right? I think from the male allyship workstream perspective, we've kind of started, it's not too long that we've been doing this, but as we're kind of understanding issues and working together with the male ally group to try to combat those issues, and then have a feedback loop with the, like with women in the organization, for example, it's like we're learning on the fly, right? And it's like that allows us to kind of understand what level of transparency is desired, and also, make sure that what we're doing is like measurable in a way that people actually feel it, right? Because if people aren't feeling any change happening or the environment becoming more equitable, then obviously we're not doing the right thing. But yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's something that we'll probably learn and react to and evolve as we kind of continue on this journey.
Yeah, you asked me, yeah, I think there is a lot that can be done through certain reports, D&I reports, and we do, of course, surveys. We show our Peakon results on how actually people perceive and so on. But I think one is on the reporting side, that they see that something is happening, but I also think that I need to feel it and they need to live it, and they need to so there's one to kind of see it in the data, but they also need to feel like that's reality. So I think when it comes to us, when we do our review process, we're making sure that there is no bias, that we see that people with a certain either background or gender is reviewed differently, or if there are promotions, is it equitable? Are we seeing similarities in reporting or promotional cycles, recruiting, that people see that we are open, that we are enabling, that we are getting the diverse set of groups when we are doing our recruiting. Succession, when successions are coming, are equally considered. Do we have a broad scale that actually filters through, that people see that they have a chance to step up? When we have meetings, that people feel like all opinions matters, that have been listened to, that not only the outspoken and the loud are being heard, but also the opinion and views of everyone at the table are being listened at. So I think one is, of course, to making sure that we show the data that is actually happening, and that people actually feel it's happening. And I think that's through the reports and surveys and making that public. But I also think that people really need to see it and feel it, and that we also live by the values that behind the numbers. So and that we take those actions when need be.
Okay, so showing tangible action, backing it up with data, and making sure that people feel it to see it. Diana, Melissa, anything you would like to add to how companies can become more transparent in terms of their D&I work?
On that point, the data is incredibly important. I agree with everything that Nicholas said. I also, what came to me was that, and leaders need to say it, just like he did. And that needs to trickle down. So it needs to be at the very top, and then to the next layer of leadership, and then down to managers. In addition to talking about what we're doing, they actually need to know that the leaders of the company care, and that there is a regular cadence of communicating around it.
Yeah, I love that point of being communicated often and coming from the leaders. I think the other piece that to me is important to highlight in this space of transparency is being clear about what can be done and by when, and what is not something that will be able to be prioritized. And when we make mistakes, I think that is also critical, right? Because when we acknowledge the errors that we made or the areas of opportunities that we have, we build trust in the organization. So employees and stakeholders will develop more of that connection when we're being transparent about what's working and what's not working.
Diane, I just want to follow that up, because employees can tolerate a lot of, we're not going to do that, or we can't do that. It's when there's silence that they get frustrated. And so part of being transparent is telling them the truth about what is possible, just like you said, and what's not possible at the time.
Very good. I think that's a super nice wrap up of transparency for employees and outside the corporate world as well.
I'm glad that she's saying that. I hope that is the reality, because in organization, and we still learn, and we are not perfect, and there will be, and we will learn on the go. I learn on the go, and many with me will also learn the importance and what might be a system that is not equitable, and it was not intended to not be equitable. It's just that how it happened to be, or all structures, all systems that is there. And I think so I'm glad you're saying that, because we are improving as we go. I don't say that everything is perfect, but I think what I expect from everyone is that they want to improve, that they want to make a difference, that when they see something that is not equitable or is not right or not, that they actually take that action. Because sometimes they might not see it or realize it. We have been living in a different world for a very long time, so we might also sometimes be a little bit blinded by it, and all sides of it. So I'm glad that there's sometimes also understanding that everything is not yet perfect. I wish it would be.
Yeah, very good point, Niklas. And I think, as everyone here has stated before, D&I is a journey, and it's also a change management process. And you can't expect to make changes overnight, even though we would all love to do it as fast as possible. I think if we had a magic wand, everyone here would like to pull it out and just fix everything in one go. But as said, it takes time, and I don't think delivery is known for being the most patient organization. So for us, it can sometimes feel a little bit like an uphill, but it's a cause worth fighting. And speaking of starting out and doing better, we have a question from the audience, which I think is very timely and good. So I'll pull that in now. It's from Neslian, and I hope I pronounced your name correctly. If I don't, please ping me. Who is asking, many companies do not know where to start or how to start when it comes to D&I. So if you would have any advice for companies who would like to kick off genuine D&I policies, so if you focus on the policy area, rather than just the window show, where do they begin?
Because I will love to hear your thoughts from an academic standpoint. I think I will say, you need to start by understanding what is happening in the organization, right? Hearing what the employees are needing and what they will like to see from this work. I think a lot of times we feel that there's a need for this work to be top down or bottoms up. There has to be a way of getting both integrated, where leaders are setting up a vision and a desire to make the corporation better in alignment with the values of the organization and the goals of the organization, but we're also listening to the needs of the employees, especially those who have been more impacted or more marginalized by the policies that are currently in place.
I completely agree. When I first started in my past role, I did a tour of just listening to employees. We took in information via Slack, we had town halls, one-on-one conversations, all sorts of mechanisms. With my academic hat on, I knew what the best practices were. The research has pointed us in the right direction. We don't have that much more that we have to discover. It's in how do we actually implement it. And so really getting an understanding of what the challenges and opportunities are in a particular organizational context are absolutely critical, because then we know how to layer on solutions, but it is a change management process. So listening to the employees, they will point you in the direction and they will tell you where those pain points are.
Yeah, I maybe add also from my perspective, I think the first step is to truly understand the importance of it. And I think a lot of business leaders haven't understood that. They understand that it's important from a perspective point of view, but they don't understand why it is important. And I know it sounds outrageous here, but I truly don't understand that all company and business leaders understand. They try to solve it by maybe recruiting. They be like, oh, let's then recruit a little bit more, and let's, but they don't know really why do you want to bring diverse inclusion? Why do you want to make the workforce more efficient, better? Diverse groups are better, and all the research that Melissa can point us to is clearly pointing there. But I think when you truly understand that the meaning and the importance of it, I think you're gonna solve it. You're gonna find the research and the people and the organization, and you will listen to it, and I think you will make progress. Then of course, what are the biggest levers and so on? And I don't know. I think Melissa and Diana can probably answer this best, but I think employees will probably be a good source of help where to drive that. But I think too many organizations are too focused only on the recruiting side, rather than making sure that promotion process and review process and how to making sure that people want to be in the company. If you speak by gender here, but all sort of gender and diversity. So yeah, I think the first step is to truly understand the needs and the values.
That's such a critical point. I think if there's not an understanding of the why this matters to me as an individual who's leading the organization, and why this matters to us as an organization who wants to do good for the world, then it's going to be very difficult to get anything else off the ground, right? Because the value proposition is not there. The commitment and the passion to it is not there without answering those questions first.
That's right. And because it takes so much persistence, there has to be that motivation to move beyond just check the box, to really unpack and get to root cause, and then to build back again in a way that's more inclusive.
That point is key, Melissa, the motivation, because this is not easy. And there's so many moments in which the people that are doing the work can get discouraged because things are not moving fast enough, or things are not changing as fast as we want them to change. And so that connection to that motivation and to the why we're doing it, it's definitely going to be that fuel that will keep the momentum going.
Okay, thank you so much for those initiated answers. We do have a question from the audience. It's a lot of them trickling in, so thank you so much for posting. We will continue to weave them in to our conversation. And there is one here which is pretty connected to what you've just discussed now. So when we talked about where companies start, almost all of you were mentioning listening into the organization and talking to people, town halls, getting to understand what the issues at hand currently are. And a lot of that is actually about gathering data to make sure that you have the relevant data points so you can make informed decisions and form a strategy that's based on reality, and not just on qualitative conversations, which is also very important, but an overall picture of where the organization stands. And we have someone from the audience who is interested in the data points. And the question as follows is, do your companies measure the average compensation across the organization and how it varies from different groups, like women, people of color, visa holders? Because to this person, and I very much agree, this is an extremely effective and accurate way of measuring how diverse an organization actually is, or maybe even equitable, perhaps a bit more. Who it hires, who it promotes, like you were referring to before, Niklas. So in terms of data, coming back to the question, do your companies measure it, and how do you use it? Maybe we'll start with you, Niklas, since you were talking about promotion velocity before.
Yes, so we do measure it, yes. So the answer is yes, and we do take actions on it. So and there is, I think the problem for us is less around, do I get same compensation in the same role? And now I do simple for myself, and let's take the example of gender here. But that could also be reflected in other areas. Are we paying the same for the same role? And I think we are nearly there. I think one or cycle or so away from getting there. So every cycle making sure that we are getting there, but there's still a couple of % difference, and we are bridging that as we speak actively. The challenge for us is probably more that we lack in the organization, that there are more male senior leaders or leaders, unfortunately. Again, as staying to the gender topic now. And there are also difference in the functional areas. So we are of course very tech heavy, and tech is generally, or for us at least, a significant overrepresentation of men, and is also an area which has very high compensation in compared to the overall organization. So if you look on an average basis, then that is a problem. If you look on levels and within roles, I think we are nearly there. But we really have to work on developing, promoting within the organization to also get there on an average basis. I think we still have some work to beyond. I think we are measuring on beyond the gender. I speak a lot about gender now, and that's probably the first step that where we probably put where we have more data, but we're also working on the other side of diversity. I think on that angle we are doing even better, or we are doing better.
I think that a lot of companies are afraid to start because it seems so daunting, but remembering that you can iterate on it and you can start, you're looking within roles and looking for equity within roles, and then seeing that there's a different distribution of individuals from groups across the different types of roles, and continuing to look at that. Doing pay equity analysis for underrepresented groups and looking for divergences, and then being transparent and communicating back to the organization along with actions is one of the most direct ways of building credibility and a sense of commitment to these issues. So it's very important, and more companies are doing it in varying degrees.
Doing it and reporting on it, and understanding that there in some countries it is a requirement from the government that there needs to be transparency in that space. And so I think to your point, Melissa, more and more companies are doing it. More and more companies are learning how to do it better. I think in that process, we're also creating transparency across industries.
Thank you, everyone. I've just got a little pointer from one of our great moderators that I need to hurry up with my second question section, because we've been discussing around this for a bit. So what we're going to move into now is more around the power of leadership when it comes to D&I, and the power of allyship. And Kane, I would like to start with you, because as you mentioned before, you are co-chair of one of our initiatives to support women in the workplace by being the co-chair of a male allyship group. Can you tell us, what does a male allyship group do, and how did you start with it?
Yeah, thanks, Sigrid. Yeah, it's a great question. I think for me, this kind of my journey as with this idea, this concept of allyship, started a few years ago. It was the first time that I really heard this word ally, actually. And at that point, I started to try to understand what it actually meant, and I decided to take a conscious effort to, prioritize male allyship over other types of allyships for different reasons. And when I joined Delivery Hero, I accelerated my activity in this regards. And it started with first joining this ERG within Delivery Hero called Female Heroes. And so attending the meetings and kind of hearing perspective from the women in this group, that's kind of started it off. And then we had Delivery Hero had the first kind of gender-focused summit earlier this year called Women Connect, and we had a panel about male allyship in that summit, and we got really great feedback from a lot of the audience around that summit. And so it's kind of like this excitement, and also this kind of actualization of the importance of the topic in general, kind of led us to create a constant thread within the organization around male allyship. And what we've been doing so far, it's very much aligned. It's nice to hear these perspectives from Melissa and Diana, these industry kind of leaders, and kind of to benchmark it against what we're doing, because what we started with doing was just talking to people and trying to understand what are women going through, what are their experiences, right? What are they feeling suppressed by, or whatever the case is. and then taking that feedback or those insights and working with the male ally group and trying to how can we combat these things, right? How can we reduce these experiences that women are feeling that are, ultimately it's like, we would like, kind of like I said earlier, we would like to be able to measure our contributions, right, or the work that's being done, and ultimately people will feel it, and we can kind of measure that the work that's being done has had some sort of like impact, right? I think another thing is right now we started off, it's early stages still, and it's only in Central. And I think another big objective of ours would be to expand it to other territories, have it be more of kind of like a global thing. And then another key thing we would like to accomplish as well is obviously male allyship's not the only type of allyship. And, I think, this was mentioned by everyone, I think, on the panel already. So it's kind of collaboration and sharing and learning from each other and how valuable this is. So we also would like to collaborate with other allies, right, and get their perspective and their ways of working and see how we can kind of leverage each other to all, increase our impact in our respective kind of areas.
Ken, you were talking a bit about education and creating more awareness across the organization by utilizing the male allyship group. And there is a question from the audience, specifically from Nathan, around how we can educate not only the people around us, but specifically our leaders. And I would like to post this first you, Kane, but then do a round of answers from the rest of the panelists, because I find it really interesting. So Nathan is saying that sometimes leaders inadvertently use gendered or non-inclusive language. It happens to the best of us. But what are some of your tactful, I think very nice to point that out, and effective suggestions to highlight and educate upwards without making others feel embarrassed or uncomfortable when we hear such language in the workplace? Kane, do you have any tips and tricks for that?
Yeah, sorry, my internet, I was jumping in and out a little bit, but I think you mentioned kind of, leaders not using gender inclusive language and how can we kind of combat that? That's the question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think, kind of going along with, what we've been doing so far with the male allies, I think it's kind of understanding in one particular organization, what are those instances? Like, what is that language and what is that behavior? Right? I think a lot of stuff that we're seeing so far, it's not, these really kind of like big things, people are not necessarily talking about pay and stuff, but a lot of it's based off of like behaviors, right? Like men behaving in a way that's creating an unequitable environment, right? So I think, understanding within Delivery Hero, what is that language, right? And then, finding the alternatives to that and then disseminating that information or that understanding, that knowledge across the organization, I think is ultimately like at least one way how we could combat this.
Thanks, Kane. Diana, Melissa, Niklas, how do we educate upwards in a tactful way?
I think one of the things is recognizing that there's not just one tool in the toolkit and that each situation requires a different strategy. So sometimes it's by partnering one-on-one with an individual, creating a safe space for them to ask questions. Typically that falls on the professionals in the D&I and E space to just say, like, ask me anything. I am actually here to support you and to help you on your learning journey and provide additional resources. If it's in a more public setting, it depends. Sometimes there's an appropriate place for just rephrasing what someone has said. At other times, it means that you've got to actually check in and have a more explicit conversation away in private about the way something landed, and then also check with the person who is on the receiving end of it as well. And then there are going to be times where something is so egregious that in real time, there has to be something that's actually addressed. But for the most part, for leaders, they're looking for partners. They want to do the right thing, but they have very busy professional lives, and we want them to focus on that work. And so they need help and assistance. So that's how I would suggest that we approach that.
Yeah, if I may borrow a bit of what we do at Microsoft with the framework that we utilize when we think about allyship and the role that we all play in being allies to each other. And so a lot of times, to Melissa's point, we don't know what we don't know, right? I even think about the times that I've said something or I inadvertently misgender someone, right? And the opportunities that were afforded to me by that individual, just to pull me aside and tell me, hey, this is what you said and this is how it impacted me, and then just engage in that conversation. Calling people in and giving them an opportunity to learn is what we always recommend to our employees at Microsoft, providing a bit of that space for the conversation to continue and for growth to actually happen. And so that point is a solid one. I think that there are interpersonal type of interventions, like the ones we're talking about, like that one-to-one, that one-to-many, but there are also systemic interventions that we have to start thinking about, and it's how do we build that common language and that common knowledge across the organization. And then in that instance is where things like training and learning and webinars and conversations like the ones we're having right now will play a role.
And that's so critical that everyone then has the same common language, because individuals can look around and then they know collectively what should happen, and there's support for actually being, an upstander and speaking out or providing support.
And speaking about common language and role modeling behavior, Niklas, as a very senior leader in our organization, or pretty much the most senior one, because you've also been here the longest, I've checked the lists you have. I think there's one more employee who's been here longer than you, and I'm not sure how that is even possible. But in any case, that was a bit off track. What do you do, and how do you see your responsibility in terms of modeling and inclusive behavior to the rest of the organization?
Yeah, I'm making sure that everyone understands that this is top priority and this is why this is important. And I think in general, I'm a big believer that the way you communicate is filtering down slowly. I don't know if you have a role model position and so on. And so I, for example, I did very small things, but if I make sure that people are being heard to or listened to, then people will realize that's actually a nice way of running a meeting. Or if I have a very respectful way of greeting people and saying hi and listening to people, I hope that at least a little bit, that will be over time kind of how everyone will be influenced and be in the organization. So I think those small things that you do has a very big impact. Things that you say, things that you do, actions, how you greet. So there are often very small things. And to your earlier point, I also hope that leaders are also very accepting to the fact that they will get feedback if you say something wrong, or that people actually will dare to say, hey Niklas, you should probably not say that, or that's how I felt, or that's how that was received. I hope that will also make easier to make this upward feedback, that there's actually an openness to take it and not dismiss it in any way, because I think that also happens from time to time. So kind of showing your openness and small things makes a big difference over time.
Small things do in fact make a big difference, and one other thing that makes a big difference is being on time, and we're almost out of time. So with that bridge, I would like to maybe round up with just one final round of a quick question, so you get around 30 seconds before we wrap it up and say goodbye and happy Friday to everyone. We're living in a new reality. It's a hybrid workplace, and leaders showing up in this environment is something that I think we're all thinking about, the best ways to do it. So in terms of being inclusive as leaders, if you would have one recommendation to leave us with as we step into the weekend to create a more inclusive hybrid workplace in a leadership position or just as a team member, what would it be? Kane, let's start with you and then kick it off with the rest of our panelists.
Yeah, no, it's also a good question, and I think we're kind of we're working our way back towards how does this post-pandemic situation kind of look like. But I think just kind of to build off as something that Nicholas mentioned before, his last kind of point, I think, I don't know what exactly it is that a leader does in order to create a culture in which D&I is valued and people prioritize it, but there's something that happens that makes an organization feel this way, right? And I've witnessed this within Delivery Hero. I've seen, like junior staff kind of have an idea, something that they want to do to push a D&I initiative forward. And I've seen that idea turn into kind of like a small project and evolve ultimately into an organization-wide program where the C-level are actually involved and engaged in that particular project. So I think, having this culture is what allows, these problems to ultimately be solved. And it's whatever that secret recipe is that embeds it within the culture is what, ultimately allows us to kind of work through these things and solve these problems.
Thanks, Kane. Melissa, Diana.
So I would take it to the level of even first line managers. So much of the way that they engage with their team members impacts how individuals feel seen, heard, their ability to contribute. And when these first line managers actually demonstrate genuine care for the people on their teams, it is felt. It makes them feel more productive. In a remote working environment, you have to be more deliberate about that because you just don't bump into people. So thinking about who have I not seen, what might be going on for them, how can I demonstrate that I care about them holistically?
Yeah, I'll add to the point of curiosity. Genuinely be curious. Don't make assumptions. You may think that for some individuals, being remote is actually what they prefer. That may not necessarily be the case. And so really getting curious and comfortable, asking some maybe uncomfortable questions because they may feel personal, people will appreciate that. Like when I have the conversations with my team members to ask them, what do you need? How can I support you through this period of time? What is your preferred method of communication? Let's talk about your working hours. If there's anything that we learned over the past 20 years during the pandemic is that the extraordinary circumstances threw a greater light on some of the inequities in our society. And it is important for us to get to truly to know people at an individual level so that we can support them the way they want to be supported.
Thanks, Diana. Niklas, any final words?
I can only echo what was just said. And I think what I would add is when you actually ask someone how they're doing and you pay attention and you show your interest, you actually will realize there is so much you can learn and so much nicer. And it's actually so much interesting, like for us, it is actually interesting to get to know and learn and hear someone out and take that time to actually be generally interested in also listening to the answer, and I think everyone will realize that it's very nice to get to know people better and understand the situation, and if they don't want to speak about it, that's also okay,
Beautiful. So to wrap it up, listen with intent, dare to ask the uncomfortable questions because that might actually be more welcome than you think. Go for the moonshot projects and don't be afraid to involve your C-level in those and get their buy-in. And with that, I would like to say thank you to Melissa, Diana, Kane and Niklas for being such wonderful panelists. It's been a pleasure talking with you and hearing both your expertise and experiences. And if you have any questions to either of our participants today, you can email us at inclusion@deliveryhero.com and we will do our best to follow up because there were some questions that we did not have time for today. So thank you so much everyone for participating and enjoy your weekends.